My parents dropped me off at my grandparents' house when I was 6 years old. Then they disappeared, not for a weekend, not for a few months, for 9 years. When they finally came back into my life, they expected me to welcome them as if nothing had happened. And for a long time I did. I smiled, stayed quiet, and let them pretend they were still my parents. But everything changed 2 months before my wedding, when my mother looked me in the eyes and claimed they had sacrificed everything for me. That's when I finally said the one thing I'd been holding back for more than a decade. And after that day, my parents never came to my wedding. I was 6 years old when my parents left me at my grandparents' house. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Kids don't question everything adults do. When my parents told me I was spending a few days with Grandma and Grandpa, I believed them completely. I hugged my mother goodbye, waved to my father as they got into the car, and waited for them to come back. At first, a few days became a few weeks. Then a few weeks became months. Eventually, months turned into years. Waiting became part of my life. Every birthday, every holiday, and every school event, I found myself hoping they would show up. Sometimes I convinced myself they were just busy. Other times, I imagined they were planning a surprise visit. Deep down, I simply wanted to believe they hadn't forgotten about me. As I grew older, I started making excuses for them. Maybe they were struggling financially. Maybe work kept them away. Maybe they were doing the best they could. Children have a strange way of protecting the people who hurt them. It's easier to believe there's a reason than to accept that someone chose not to stay. The one person who never let me feel abandoned was my grandmother. She never spoke badly about my parents. Not once. She never sat me down and filled my head with resentment. Instead, she focused on showing up. She attended every parent-teacher meeting, every school performance, every birthday party, every graduation, and every important moment of my life. Whenever I needed someone, she was there. If I woke up crying in the middle of the night, she was there. If I got sick, she stayed beside my bed. If I failed a test, she encouraged me. If I succeeded, she celebrated me like I had just achieved something incredible. She wasn't trying to replace my parents. She simply became the person they chose not to be. Eventually, I stopped asking when my parents would return. I stopped waiting by the window. I stopped imagining their car pulling into the driveway. Reality has a way of settling in, and eventually reality told me something I didn't want to hear. My grandmother was my family, not them. Then, when I was 15 years old, something happened that I never expected. My parents came back. Just like that. No dramatic explanation, no heartfelt apology, no conversation about where they'd been for nearly a decade. They simply reappeared and acted as if everything was normal. At first, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was angry, part of me was confused, but another part of me was still that little 6-year-old girl who had spent years wishing her parents would come back. So I gave them a chance. Maybe, I thought, we could finally become a family again. As I got older, we started spending more time together. There were family dinners, holiday gatherings, and occasional phone calls. On the surface, everything looked fine. But looking back, I realized we were all participating in the same lie. Nobody talked about the missing years. Nobody talked about the birthdays they missed. Nobody talked about the nights I cried wondering why my parents didn't want me. Instead, everyone pretended. My father told jokes and expected me to laugh. My mother called me baby, as if she hadn't missed almost every year of my childhood. I went along with it because silence felt easier than confrontation. It was easier to smile than to ask questions I knew nobody wanted to answer. Then I got engaged. Suddenly, everything changed. My parents became incredibly interested in my life, especially my mother. She started calling almost every week. She wanted updates about the wedding. She wanted opinions on decorations. She wanted to go dress shopping. She wanted to be involved in every decision. At first, I tried to appreciate the effort, but the more involved she became, the more uncomfortable I felt. It wasn't because she wanted to help. It was because she seemed more interested in looking like a mother than actually being one. One afternoon, she asked if she could give a speech at the rehearsal dinner. I looked at her and quietly said no. The room immediately became awkward. It was the first real boundary I had ever placed between us. She stared at me in disbelief. "I'm your mother," she said. "People are going to think something is wrong with us." I couldn't help but laugh a little. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Something is wrong with us." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She looked hurt, but she didn't argue. Not that day. The real confrontation happened 2 months before my wedding. Like every Sunday, my grandmother invited everyone over for lunch. Even in her late 70s, she still cooked everything from scratch. The smell of homemade food filled the house. Everyone seemed relaxed. My aunt was telling stories. My father was laughing. My mother looked emotional. Then my aunt brought up the years my parents spent away from me. She sighed and said it must have been incredibly difficult for them to be separated from their daughter for so long. My father nodded. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Then she said something that changed everything. We did what we had to do. The entire table went quiet. I slowly put down my fork. My grandmother looked at me. She didn't say anything. She simply watched. My father gave me a look that practically begged me to let it go. But for the first time in years, I wasn't interested in protecting anyone's comfort. "No," I said calmly. "You did what was easiest." My father's expression changed immediately. "That's not fair," he replied. I looked directly at both of them. "You had a choice." The room felt frozen. "You could have found a way to keep me with you. Or you could leave me somewhere safe and move on with your lives." Nobody interrupted. Nobody moved. "You chose the second option." My mother immediately started crying. But I wasn't finished. "And that's your decision. You were adults. You made your choice." Then I pointed toward my grandmother. "But don't sit in her house and call it a sacrifice." The room went completely silent. "She's the one who sacrificed." My voice cracked. She raised me. She attended every school event. She stayed awake when I was sick. She comforted me when I cried. She celebrated every achievement. She was there. I looked back at my parents. "You weren't." My mother began sobbing. My aunt immediately told me that was enough. But after carrying that pain for years, enough didn't mean anything anymore. "I've spent years protecting your feelings," I said. I stayed quiet so everyone could pretend we were a normal family. My father pushed his chair back and walked outside without saying a word. A few moments later, my mother followed him. The room became silent. Then my grandmother calmly reached for my glass, refilled it with water, sat back down, and said a single word: "Eat." For some reason, that almost made me cry. 3 months later, my wedding arrived. My grandmother was there. My friends were there. The people who had actually shown up for me throughout my life were there. My parents weren't. A few days before the wedding, they sent a card saying they needed time. Time to process. Time to heal. Time to think. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent most of my childhood needing time from them. Now they needed time from me. After the wedding, my mother sent one final message. She said she hoped I understood they had done their best. I stared at the text for a long time. Then I put my phone down. Not because I forgave them, not because I hated them, but because there was nothing left to say. Some wounds aren't created by a single moment. They're created by years of absence, years of silence, years of choosing not to be there. Being fed and housed isn't the same as being loved. And being someone's biological parent doesn't automatically make them family. Family is the people who stay, the people who show up, the people who choose you every single day. For me, that person was my grandmother. She never asked for recognition. She never demanded gratitude. She simply loved me. And when I finally stopped protecting the story my parents had built around themselves, everything fell apart. Maybe I broke something that day. Maybe there is no going back. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't performing for them. I was simply telling the truth.